Talking about scaling up, there's been a frenzy of interest in all things AI. To what extent do you think artificial intelligence applications could help your business scale up? How are you looking at this?
Well, AI is going to dramatically, if it already hasn't, change our industry. I mean, I can, top of my head, I can think of 3 issues. Applications in drug development, drug discovery. You don't need to go to the manual work in figuring out the configuration of molecules. AI will do that for you and give you a probability assessment on an effective outcome. You can also think about the marketing application of AI, the writing, the speed of which information is distilled and summarized. And last but not least, AI is also going to be used in social media, in the way forums are being conducted. And that poses a problem because you no longer know what is fictitious and factual. So there are also caveats in terms of using AI and what we will do with it.
How do you think AI will play into ESG considerations going forward, the way companies are run, the ethical considerations? Do you think that's not fully been understood?
Well, ESG is, as you know, and as we all know in public companies, a hot topic. It's the best way to explain it. It's under the umbrella of good governance, where a number of criteria need to be met in order to retain and attract new shareholders. Because many funds will look at what is green, what is brown, what are the criteria to invest. And so you have no choice than to comply and understand your deficiencies in-house and what you need to do in order to attract those investors that are sensitive to ESG issues. But you have these discussions with advisors, you have discussions with the 2 leading proxy advisors in the world. So it is a game changer, I think, in our industry.
How are you navigating it? Because there's obviously a lot of talk about, the fact that there's greenwashing going on, there's ethical washing. What kind of standards are you more drawn to? Because, of course, there's also this conflict between good governance in terms of the stakeholders, but also in terms of, you've got to meet criteria from institutional investors and governments. This is quite a maze to navigate through.
In general, there's a good rationale, there's a logic to it. And as long as you keep that in mind, and for instance, the external parts, identifying your vendors and suppliers, qualifying them, understanding, doing deep diligence on them. Are they using child labor? Where are they producing? What are they supplying? And so you need to be diligent before you enter contracts, for instance. And so I believe that it actually benefits our industry.
And so that new kind of direction right at the centre of your company, will you ensure that is not just a kind of a unit on itself, but it actually blends into all of your operations? Because that's really what's needed right from the beginning, as you say, when you enter into contracts rather than it being an afterthought.
Yeah, so in general, you need to be uniform in everything you do internally and externally. And I think the check and balances that ESG brings to you needs to be policed and monitored in-house. So I've got no qualms over it. I actually believe that the companies will grow and improve simply because of this new metric.
It's interesting that throughout you've alluded to the fact that CLINUVEL is unique in many respects. For some, that uniqueness could pose more risks, but do you think it actually means that you're trying to limit risks and managing risks by taking this unique approach?
Yes, but with all the good comes the bad. If you manage risks and you're so risk averse in the approach, in order to build value, you also consume time. And then it poses the question, what is the opportunity cost of running companies 10, 20 years on pipelines? So you need to balance that. But in general, I believe that risk mitigation in pharmaceuticals is needed, because the failure of pivotal phase 3 trials, the trials that need to register a drug, is most of the times an event that you can't overcome anymore. The confidence of shareholders is lost. They will not come back to the stock. So in order to reduce that risk of failure, you do everything up front, and before you go into these pivotal phase 3 trials, you most of the times know that you're going to succeed on safety and efficacy. So the risk mitigation, the risk approach, in my view, long-term saves investors money, but also provides value.
And what have you learned from failures?
The key learning is that you can fail. You need to admit to it. You need to have a team that is able and willing to look at it, but that learn from it. And that's called the just culture. You need to have a team or an environment where you can fail without assigning blame, and then you can only improve. And in pioneering, in doing new things, you by definition will fail because there's no template. And in order to progress, you will need to have the protocols in place that allow for failure. So it's a step-wise procession. It's 2 forward and 1 back. And that is what developing these companies entails.
The patient community is right at the heart of what you do. Just how does it feel when you hear about the life-changing benefits of your drug for people who've waited years to go out in the sunlight?
It's very difficult because as a drug developer, you are quite focused on premises, on hypotheses, on what could be. And very few of us actually realize that ultimate goal of bringing new medications to market. But it's still not quite the same until you hear the experiences of families and patients who say, you dramatically change your life. And once you start meeting them and hearing the anecdotes, once you understand the reactions of prescribers who say, well, we never had a tool for them, and now you've made us as a community really happy, that's priceless. That there is no reward for that. And that binds a whole team. That is why we stay together for 10, 15 years. So the median retention of our executive team is 16 years. It's unusually long. The turnover in this company is very slow. And I believe it's owing to the fact that you strive for that commonality, the objective of doing good, and then the financial rewards follow. And if you change that sequence, you go sideways. And so the answer is it's extremely rewarding. It's excellent.
And I'm interested in your own personal background. What do you think your experience has enabled you to bring to CLINUVEL when it comes to navigating the myriad challenges and opportunities ahead?
I've had quite a diverse background, and at that certain age and stage of your life, you try to bring it all together and make sure that you build a sustainable and robust company, and you leave that behind for the next generation. But there are a number of values and principles that you need to abide by, and that have formed me in life. And that value system needs to run throughout the company, and also how you deal with third parties. I believe that risk management should be at the forefront of any company. And in the paradox in pharmaceuticals and life sciences is that you believe that your developments can all come to fruition, but the reality is that only 10% of all these pipelines come through and reach markets. And I call that the fourth principle. It is great to believe that you have the remedies for the future benefit of patients and people in the world, but it's 10, 15 years away, because that's how long the cycle takes. And so we start from the fourth principle at the rear end and understand early on, is the treatment reimbursable? Is someone going to agree to pay for it? Because if you do not answer that question early on, you have a tragedy at hand, because you have spent 10 or 15 years at 500 to 1.2 billion in funding, only to discover at the end that you might not get the reimbursement for it. And that's a tragedy for not only the patients, but also for shareholders. So the way we approach it is quite different. We want to have small proof of principles in the beginning, understanding early on whether the payors are willing or contemplating paying for it in 5 or 10 years' time. And if the answer is probably not, we're unsure, we will probably abandon that pipeline. I'm quite a cautious individual in leading a team, but also like a team that is homogeneous, that has principles and values and understands the common objectives. But don't forget, the company started off from a very low base. It was in bankruptcy. So there was only one way up after 25 years of not reaching its objectives. But the ambition, the drive to build and expand needs to be transmitted to our staff, to our managers, to our teams. And I think that's just one of my key functions, to infect them with the same desire, enthusiasm and vision. And once you have that team in place, then it becomes a system, an automatism.
So what's your vision for the next 5, 10 years?
I know about 10 years, but certainly the next 3 years. We have a house in scaffolds. It's all the facades of the house, the 4 sides, are behind scaffolds. And slowly we're going to peel it off. But the excitement is actually to realize the vision that we had. And we're over halfway. And so it would be a house with 3 products, 9 diseases, 4 cosmetic product lines, a house that has its own marketing, branding, communications team, its own manufacturing, all the skill set in-house, and that is able to grow its profitability and being independent. And that vision being realized is the most exhilarating part.
So how close are you to achieving that vision and ripping off the scaffolding?
It's difficult to assign a percentage, but I think we're over 60%. I see every day the contours and the progress that's being made. And to realize that vision is a life's ambition.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your vision for CLINUVEL for the future.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.